fact, I hope to convince you at the end of this that you should focus almost exclusively on international stocks, which is really, people are surprised when I say that, but here's why. So let's just do sort of domestic and foreign. We'll just call that US and ex-US. And we'll sort of do I wouldn't call it pros and cons, but we'll kind of try to do a pros and cons thing. I have to practice with the stylus. I'm not fantastic at it. All right. All right, so the biggest issue when you're an investor, what would you guys say the biggest issue is when you're an investor? What are you trying to get the most, what are you looking for when you're an investor and you're trying to figure out what stocks to invest in? Akil already beats us to the punch. What do you guys think? What's the number one issue? Number one issue. Arbitrage. Wow, great job, Ping. Great job. It is arbitrage. Arbitrage. And I've talked a few times about thinking about arbitrage as a variable, and define arbitrage as kind of arbitrage is the Martin Shkreli definition of arbitrage. Arbitrage. Let's make up a variable. Let's pick Greek alphabet. Let's pick one of these bastards and actually use it. Let's use new, because new is not used much. Doesn't get a lot of love. All right, so we'll call it new. Arbitrage is the tendency for a security in a group of securities for maybe one security, and we could say the probability or tendency in a group of securities, for one security in a group of securities to be mispriced. And obviously, this is sort of we're going to use this as the noun for our self-described variable. We can also define it as a verb. To arbitrage something is to capture the arbitrage opportunity. And it's funny, in the 80s, hedge fund managers, when you read Den of Thieves, you'll see the hedge fund managers used to call themselves arbitrageurs, or arbs. So it's funny to see how the nomenclature changed in the 70s and 80s. That's what they use. So anyway, the reason that it's important to think of arbitrage as a more complex concept than just a verb or a noun is that if you think about it as a variable like new, you can actually say that what tends to increase arbitrage and decrease arbitrage. You think about arbitrage as dispersion. If you think about it as a scatter plot, right? And you say this is new, and this is, let's see. Yeah, let's just say this is whatever variable we want to select. I don't know, let's pick. Well, let's see. So you have stocks. Let's say this is a fair value line. This is fair value. So arbitrage is, you could define as distance from new to fair value, right? Or arbitrage is fair value minus market value, right? And so the distance, you want a stock market that's like this, right? You want a stock market where the distance is maximized, right? You want stocks that are out here, super overvalued, super undervalued. And the x-axis can be something as simple as market cap. So pretend that the red lines are the Japanese market, and the black lines are the American market. It looks like the American market has a lot more securities trading near fair value, and that makes it very hard. Small caps, large caps, they're all kind of trading near fair value. Whereas the Japanese stock market has many, many outliers. And so one has to think about, especially if you sort of like quantitative finance, and I encourage you to like it, one has to think about what situations does this variable nu, what situations cause these distances. We'll call this, we can call this another variable, we can call it like mu, as delta from, it's basically delta from fair value, right? So what causes mu to change? What causes mu to change? And how do we get maximum, what situations do we get maximum mu or minimum mu? And yeah, liquidity is a major impact. So when there's a lot of liquidity and stock markets have a lot of players, I think liquidity and number of players is basically sort of two major things that inversely correlate with these variables. Bull markets, sort of sentiment is another one. If there's an extreme bull market, you can get serious deviation from fair value. Anytime there's a crisis, some big crisis, whether it's a bank bailout or whatever it might be, that increases mu quite a bit, or nu. I guess we're saying this is the same thing. I'll just call it mu. So in any event, we kind of want to look for markets where we have more dispersion around that. So the reason that domestic stocks, they have more players, the U.S. market is basically dominated by quantitative investors and hedge funds and all these things, whereas the foreign markets have less players and they're therefore more interesting. So that's sort of the big plus, and then stocks, we only care about that. So that's the plus, but there are minuses. So minuses, one issue is language barrier. English is the language we know, and here it's sort of anything goes, and there are companies that will not issue press releases in English, and so forth. The next is sort of regulatory barriers. So here we have the SEC, and we're used to it, and here again, anything goes. So this is a big minus. Then we've got things like language. Wow, thank you. Trading hours is something a lot of guys don't like. I think it's sort of silly because I'm a long-term investor, but one is while you're awake and one is often while you're asleep. Another one is currency, where you trade in the dollar versus anything goes. And the last thing is sort of your business network, your brokers, your relationships, etc. And if you only know people that are trading U.S. stocks, you kind of want to trade U.S. stocks because, So there's a lot of drawbacks. But if you like making money, which is what the goal of investing is, you definitely have an advantage in foreign markets. And then the other, I guess, slight advantage is complete understanding of your sector. So I remember following the video game sector, and Nintendo and Sony are only traded in Japan. I think that Sony has an ADR, but the point is that you can't really understand your sector if one of the biggest players is foreign based. So you have to sort of get used to understanding that. And then finally, so that complete understanding is actually pretty important. So I tend to think the first two dramatically outweigh the other five, which are overblown. Most companies do issue releases in English and whatever local country. Currency is not a problem. In fact, it adds some diversity to your portfolio. the awake asleep thing shouldn't matter unless you're a day trader, and if you're a day trader, you're going to lose money anyway. The SEC thing doesn't make a difference. You have to get a little bit accustomed to foreign regulatory practices, but once you do, you sort of get to understand it, and your network should have no bounds, right? You can have a network outside of the U.S. too.